And before we take any questions, I just love this picture, and I'm just staying down on Route 66, and there's some great trees. Have you ever heard that old Chinese adage that the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago? The second best is today. That this community clearly is benefiting from people who planted trees many, many years ago, and you have to be doing the metaphorical equivalent to position this community for continued future success. So if there's not a first question, we'll skip immediately to the second. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, so you're in a situation, things are changing so rapidly. We want to plan for that change. If things are changing this rapidly, what do you do if the choice that you make going forward is the wrong one?
That's a great question. And did I hear during the introduction that you're a pro tem mayor, that you're okay. So I grew up as a strategic planner, and in a world that was not changing that much, strategic planning made sense because we could kind of look out a number of years. But in a world that's changing as fast as ours, strategic planning is becoming less and less helpful. I don't want to say it's not useful. We should all be doing it, but if strategic planning is becoming less helpful, what has to replace it? And I argue strategic experimentation. None of us fully know what is going to work. And I know this is deeply uncomforting to city council members and to elected officials because any experiment that doesn't work out, you're going to get hammered by the citizens. That's the name of the game. And that's really unfortunate. But I think as citizens, what you have to start doing is cutting your elected officials a little more slack, is to say, look, because none of us know fully what's going to work, as a community, let's start out with some small strategic experiments. Those that don't work out, let's just chalk it up as a learning experience, but those that do seem to be showing some promise, let's feed some more resources too. So with the Internet of Things, let's start small. Let's just look at the recycling and the trash bins first to say, look, could we put some sensors on that? And then if that works, then, and it saved us money, you can document and show the citizens that, then you move on to the next thing. So again, I know it's a deeply dissatisfying answer, but I think we just have to get more comfortable with experiments, and we have to understand that not everything is going to work, and that's the price of living in a world where the only constant is change. This man.
Hey, everybody forgive me in advance. Please forgive me in advance. Can you hear me? I'm thinking out of the box. Since you are emphasizing the USA, the continent of Europe, is the Middle East doing anything like this also when I think of that part of the world?
Well, I gave you I will give you the earlier example of what the United Emirates is doing with the 3D printed buildings, and Saudi Arabia is moving ahead on 3D printing. But it's really interesting that they are, although they're oil-rich countries, they have said the future of energy is not oil, and they're moving aggressively into solar power and advanced battery storage technology. That they understand that if they want to remain relevant in the future, they have to do things differently. So there are some really innovative things going on in the Middle East, also in Asia and India. India, as a continent, has said solar is already as affordable as coal is today. And they said our future is with solar, and they're doing some really innovative things. And so I think that, I mean, I love America, but can America learn from other countries? Absolutely, and we should.
And I hope ISIS stays out of the way.
Yeah.
True, and first of all, thank you for coming and, great presentation. True, technology is helping us, but it's creating more problem than solving the problem. See, the more technology grows, I'm becoming more busy, I'm getting more emails. So you're right, you have to take a break and look differently. So how do you stand back and look at the life and busy life, ignore the busy life and look at the life in a different perspective? Give us some tips or.
So that's a
That would be
great question. Is that one of the things I do is that I mean, technology is great, but it is also equally distracting. I mean, I've found myself, I've written a number of books, but over the last 5-10 years, it's become more difficult for me to write because I'm constantly distracted by emails and now texts and my modern electronics. So my solution is I actually have a separate office in my house with no electronics, and I write things out by pen. And I have one of those old-time sand hour glasses, and I literally work for an hour without any distractions of modern technology because I found myself getting away from being able to engage in deep, prolonged thought. So I would actually say this idea of taking digital detoxes, you know, putting your phone down, getting out in Mother Nature it's a wonderful way to think and reflect and increase creativity. There's a great book that said that many of our kids, I don't want to say that attention deficit disorder is not real, but he said what many of our kids have today is nature deficit disorder. They're not getting out in Mother Nature and just playing, experimenting, being curious, and then being alone with their own thoughts. Because once you're alone with your own thoughts, you come up with some really creative and innovative insights. So I just try to actually get away from modern technology. And that helps me think about technology, ironically. We'll go right here, and then we'll get the microphone over to this gentleman.
Okay. I'm asking on behalf of my 6-year-old daughter who's over there. She wants to know if by the time she's in high school she can have a self-driving car, and she also wants to give you a sticker of an alligator.
Oh, excellent! I will put on the sticker of the alligator right now. Thank you very much. And what is your name?
Angel.
Angel. Thank you very much.
Sit down, sweetie.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And the answer to your question is, I believe that there will be self-driven cars for you by the time that you are 16. So I think that that's going to be a real possibility. But I will tell you this, as a father, I think you should still learn how to drive the old-fashioned way from your dad. So to do both. Yes, this gentleman over here.
A portion of the world is classified as third world, meaning they're impoverished and in want. What effect will your lily pad effect have on the proportion of those people compared to now?
That's a really good question. And to tell you the truth, I'm really optimistic. And I think the analogy you've always, or at least you hear in technology circles, is that what did the mobile phone, how did it take off in the developing parts of the world? Instead of having landlines, they simply skipped a generation of technology and went immediately to mobile. And I think that exact same thing is going to happen with renewable energy. They're not going to have a grid like the US has that is connected to a coal or a nuclear plant and that has power lines that come into cities and then have transformers that diffuse it down and put energy into the house. They're just going to have solar-powered advanced battery storage technology, maybe fuel cell technology. So they're just going to skip over an entire generation of technology, and they're going to have clean, affordable energy. I also think they're going to do something quite similar in education. They're not going to have the benefit of Azuzas and Harvards and USCs, so their only option for higher education is going to be mobile online learning. And they're going to have the smartphones and the internet connection to do that. It's not going to be as good as a traditional university, but it's better than nothing. So they're going to leapfrog a lot of our physical infrastructure, at least in terms of education, energy, and telecommunication. But the benefit to us is within the next 4 years, all 7 billion people are going to have access to high-speed internet. To understand how revolutionary this is, 2.5 billion people have access to the internet today. So 4.5 billion new people are going to come online, and the opportunity for understanding, for global growth, is going to be really exciting. So I think I'm really quite optimistic about developing world's countries' ability to not necessarily catch up to the developed world, but have a much higher standard of living than they have today. Yes, sir, down here. I can also repeat the question if we can't get on the microphone. Yes, sir. The question was, and this really is the question, I think, of our age. He said he's no Luddite, he's not anti-technology, and people have been saying technology is going to put people out of work. But now there are a number of very thoughtful people who are saying the pace of this change is displacing jobs at a faster rate than we are creating new jobs. And I actually believe that as well. So the question then becomes, well, what do we do? And this is where I have a lot of humility to say, I don't fully know, and I don't think anybody knows. But I think here's where it starts, is for too long we have said education is something that takes place from the time you're 5 to about your early 20s, and then you're expected to contribute for the next 40, 50 years of your life. In a world that's changing as fast as ours, this idea of lifelong education is going to become a reality. And so I think that the education institutions of the future aren't just going to be for high schoolers. They're going to be for all of us. The community colleges and the universities are going to have to rethink how they become sort of constant training facilities. I also think that there's going to be the potential for some really big social change. There's an issue out there, most of you haven't heard of it. How many of you have heard of a universal basic income? Any of you heard of that? Well, a few of you have. It's a radical idea, and it will strike many of you as absolutely radical. It's just saying we're going to pay everyone a flat fee of $10,000, but as a result, there's going to be no other government assistance. And the reason they are talking about this is, well, if all of these jobs are going to go away and people need to be retrained, they need to be able to afford food and a roof over their house while they're doing it, so we're going to have to somehow provide for citizens. And it's one of these issues that it might sound crazy to you today, but I think in the future there are going to be more and more thoughtful people saying, well, if that's not the answer, we have to think of something similar or along similar lines. So, yeah, let's take the question from the young man first, and then we'll come back here. Oh, that's a great. So, here's why we all need reverse mentors. Is his question was, well, what are the disadvantages of these new technologies? And let me just give you an analogy. How many of you? Are there very many Amish communities out here in California? How many of you know what Amish communities are? So most of us do. That they are people who 150 years ago essentially said, we don't want to use technology. That they didn't judge the rest of society. They said, go ahead, you use the automobile, you use the tractor, you use the telephone, electric lights. We don't want to. And the reason they said they didn't want to is because they didn't like what it was doing to their communities and families. They felt that automobiles it was too easy for the teenagers to drive away from them, and sort of was ripping apart their community. And they saw jobs going away. And they said there's inherent value in building homes and working the land. Yeah, we could be more productive with tractors, but that would put some people out of work. And so they said, as a community, we don't want to do that. And so I say to you as community, you're not passive actors in this. These technologies are real. That does not mean a community has to adopt all of these technologies. And so to answer your question, the downside is many of these technologies are ripping apart communities. And so we have to think maybe differently about them. You know, it's like, oh, 3D printers and robotics are great, but we don't want our neighbor Joe and Jolene to lose their jobs. So we as a community are not going to do that. And I think that's fine. How many of you have ever been to Portland where they still, you cannot pump your own gas in Portland? I was kind of stunned when I went there. I'm like, what? What do you mean I can't pump my own gas? Yes, I can. And I don't judge that community. They simply said, look, we think that there is value in people having jobs, and yeah, you could, but we want people to have jobs in our community. And I think that maybe that's part of the answer. So, sort of a long-winded question, but you'll find us adults are always long-winded in our answers. Why don't we take one or two more?
Sure.
Janet, you, or Valerie, you tell me how we're doing on time. We'll take this gentleman for sure, and why don't we do two more? I saw two women in the back, and so we'll do those two, and then I'll stay after for as many questions as people want individually.
My question is similar to him, but a little bit more specific. It has to do with like cyber warfare and email invasions and all these things that we have in our personal computers at home. The guy next door where I live, his whole house is going all internet automatic where lights turn on and everything like that, and he could be susceptible to some type of cyber invasion or something like that. What's the future of these negative technologies?
The future of the negative technologies is that they're real, and we have to acknowledge them. And I mean, I do in my presentation, I put a very optimistic portrayal on the Internet of Things, but the idea that we're going to have 1 billion new sensors means we're going to have 1 billion new portals in which hackers can potentially get into our homes and things to wreak havoc. And so my answer to this is, and it's not satisfactory, but here's how I like to think about it, because we're out in California. A few years ago, I came across a fascinating article from Hollywood movie reviewers, and they listed the top 50 villains and heroes of Hollywood over the last 100 years. And one character made both lists. And I'm like, well, that's weird. But any of you know what the character was? Anyone want to wager a guess? It was the Terminator. In Terminator 1, technology destroys society. In the second one, technology is the savior. And my point is, technology has always and always will be a double-edged sword. I think all we can do as a society is to say, how do we beef up the positive aspects of these technologies and then seek to minimize the negative implications? And it's not a satisfactory answer, but I think it's the best we can do. But on this whole idea of cybersecurity, there are some new emerging technologies. I didn't get into it because it's really complicated, but something called a blockchain, which is a distributed digital ledger, which might allow many of these sensors to be secure even from very sophisticated hackers. Not 100%, but significantly better than we have today. And I also think there are a lot of really bright, creative people who are trying to look at solutions so that we can reap the benefits of these technologies. Yes, in the black, and then the one in the very back, and we'll end on that.
Hi, thank you. I just wondered, is this all part of the conditioning for like Agenda 21 and Agenda 31, like the globalization of, it's sort of creating smart technology, you know, smart cities, smart cars, where everything at one point can be monitored in one generic way. If there's obviously too much usage going on, people can be fined or it can be shut off at a capacity. And if that's the case, and I say that because I just got an email from Blue Cross that said I can now video chat with my doctor, and I thought, if for a fraction of the cost, and that sounds wonderful, except for I got to thinking, do I really want to show my ailment on camera? Like, is that really something I want to consider? I don't think so. And we all kind of know that once it's in the Ethernet, it's there. We're seeing that play out right now during election time. So, and if that is the case, where the future of community is a smaller footprint and it's smart all the way around, who is actually monitoring this stuff? Who sees all of the usage? Who's monitoring? Who's the big person behind the technology, I guess, restriction?
So I would say, first, when you referred to Agenda 2121 or 2131, I'm not familiar with that. But I would say, with terms of the video chat with your doctor, I think here's how it's going to break down, is that I think that society is going to say, that is fine, and we understand and respect your right for privacy and not to do this way. But as a citizen, you have to understand, if you want to do it the other way, that your costs will be up because it is more affordable to do things via video, at least for preventative consultations. And so I think that there will just be a higher price tag on certain things because the benefit of the video conferencing is the lower price, and healthcare costs are going up. And there is so there's no good answer, but I think we're going to have to allow individuals to make their own decisions. And then, what was the last aspect of your question?
Well, Agenda 21, and you can Google it, there's tons of information on it. There's also Agenda 3030. It's about it's globalization and it's equality. It's just like what you're talking about, the flat income. It's another idea of
Oh, yeah.
getting communities to be smart communities. The footprint is smaller. Everybody is contained. Everybody's monitored, and thereby it's
Yeah. So,
but it's got a lot of drawbacks.
yeah, I would say the only answer to this is, I think one of the really big things that has happened over the last 10 years is that the Fourth Amendment has simply been erased, and most citizens don't know it, is that we should have the right to privacy, but we don't. And I think the only answer to that is society has to figure out how to watch the watchers. If we're being watched, we have to know who is watching us and when they're watching us and what they're watching. And it's a really unsatisfying answer, but I think this cat is out of the bag and we're going to have to sort of figure out how to do that. So I guess I would start here is that today people can, it's assumed that when you do something on Google or Apple or anyone that it's their data. We should flip it on its head and say, no, it's our data first. And if I want to give it to Google, then I have to specifically opt in and give them the choice. Instead of today, you have to opt out. You have to read that whole lengthy thing, and then of course you're not going to get the service, so most of us just say, all right, I'll check the box. But I think we have to kind of flip the table on its head. And again, it's not a perfect answer, but we should start there. One last question.
Yes, I have a similar concern. I'm an optometrist, and there's a lot of technology right now that's really hurting my business, and that is patients cannot just get contacts online, glasses online, but now they can actually do an eye exam online. And I agree with her. I don't like to do like consultation online because that's not doing it in person. Then that just takes away that personal touch that you have with your patients. So I want to know, how is the future going to affect small businesses like myself and, medical professionals like myself who we base on customer services?
Yes. So let me give you this answer. I'm not sure how many of you saw this article, but it was in a lot of newspapers around the country about a year ago. It was about the cuddle industry. Did any of you see this article? I mean, people who pay $80 an hour just to be hugged. And I first read it, and I'm like, and it's all above the board. It doesn't lead to anything seedy. And I was like, at first I was like, well, that's just weird. But then I went and reread the article, and I thought what was really interesting is that these people in the cuddle industry are actually leveraging the internet, but what they're doing is they're finding people who crave a deep human connection. I'm sorry to tell you, there will always be some people, if they can get optometry services for less online, they'll do that. But there are going to be people who will pay a premium for sort of this human connection. So I'm not advocating that you all hug all your customers, but this idea that there is in fact always going to be a need for human interaction is that, again, we're not passive actors in this, and I think that people will put a premium on customer service. But there will be some people who prefer for lower prices to go elsewhere. But I think your opportunity is to really focus on the human element and the customer service, and there will be people who will pay a premium for that. So with that, again, I really appreciate your attention. I'm happy to stay afterwards for individual questions.
Well, I think we can all agree that was a fascinating presentation, and whether we all embrace it or not, change is inevitable. I think we realize that. So with that, I hope this presentation has caused you all to reflect a little bit and help us better prepare for our future with the decisions we make today. So if you enjoyed tonight's presentation and you want to share it with some neighbors, we do have it videotaped. It'll be on our website, so please share that with your neighbors. And again, let's give another applause for Jack. Thank you for coming out tonight. That concludes our presentation tonight. Thank you all for coming.